Welcome to the Stronger Than Steel podcast with your host, Austin Davidson and John Keir, talking Steelers all the time. Now, here's Austin and John.
Welcome back to the Stronger Than Steel podcast. We have a guest joining us today. Been on the show a handful of times in the past and now joining us for the second time this season. It's a pleasure to welcome back previously of 89.1 The Point, now having graduated, John Goehring. It is my pleasure to welcome you back to the show. Congratulations on graduating. How are you feeling, my man?
Feeling awesome, man. It's so great to be back here. I always know that it's Steelers Browns week when we get to talk on this show, so I'm really excited for that this weekend. And
even more reason to be excited as we approach the final week of the regular season. The Browns actually, the situation is reversed. Usually the Steelers are the team that has something to play for between these two teams late in the year, but this time the Browns have everything to play for in this one. Currently in the playoffs as we stand today. Now they have not clinched, so they will need to win or lose and get help in order to make the playoffs. But week 17, the Browns are currently sitting at 10-5 with an opportunity to make the playoffs for the first time since 2002, John. It must feel kind of crazy where you guys are this close, but yet still so far, there's still one more game, one more week that needs to be played. How are you feeling right now?
Well, you said it. So close yet so far. I'm feeling good considering. I think Browns fans in general are, after being on such a roller coaster this season, all of the ups and downs, and we're at 9-4 and basically like a week away from clinching, and then last week again a week away from clinching, losing to the lowly Jets. I mean, it's been such a roller coaster, and I know Browns fans feel like that the team should have clinched the postseason by now. And so there's a little bit of frustration there. But heading into this week's game, just considering all of the circumstances surrounding it, with the Steelers not playing starters so much, that's going to make us feel, as fans, a lot more confident about this one coming in. And it doesn't matter what happened last. The NFL, you can't get too high, you can't get too low. I truly believe that, and both of our teams are a testament to that this season. But I'm feeling good about it, because if you told me at the beginning of the season that we would just need to win one game at the end to make it into the postseason, I would take that.
Indeed, and picking up from where we were the last time we met, the Colts were 4-1 heading into that first Pittsburgh game, and they got beaten pretty handily, 38-7 in that game. At 4-2, a lot of people were kind of dismissing the Browns at that point. They ended up losing another game 2 weeks later to the Raiders in a very odd. The Browns have played in a lot of bad weather games this year, very interesting to say the least. And then they come out, win 4 straight, lose a heartbreaking game to the Ravens on Monday Night Football, probably the best game of the year to this point. And then they win another game. So they ended up winning 5 out of 6 games down the stretch before losing last week, where the team has kind of silenced some doubters. And I think at this point, I can say that from what I've seen so far, this team, even though it might not be the best in the AFC, it's one of the better ones in the conference and is certainly deserving of one of the playoff spots. The issue being, as we've already touched on, this is a deep conference with a lot of good teams. One team out of the 7 participants, or there's going to be an 8th team that is deserving but will not be able to make it this year. Oh, sorry.
Are you there, buddy?
Sorry, I had an issue with the website here. What I wanted to ask you, John, was what were your thoughts on the team as they were putting together that win streak down the stretch here, and prior to going into the Jets game, that loss to the Ravens, was that the best you had felt about a loss in a long time?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, that game was really bizarre in a lot of ways, and coming in, I think we knew. I mean, I was looking at some of the the analysts' predictions, some of For What It's Worth, America's prediction coming into that one, and people were just talking about how hot the Ravens were, and then we saw it on the field that night. Obviously, the Browns secondary got shredded again, and then Lamar Jackson was just with his legs is an unbelievable talent. But the Ravens are hot right now, and I think there's a lot more to say for that than there is for records. And I don't care how the Ravens started; they're still one of the top teams in the AFC. And that game, that was a tough loss because of the way it ended. But at that point, I was still feeling really, really good about the Browns, and I still am. You mentioned winning 5 out of the last 6. I mean, and with some of those games, really impressive victories like that win over the Giants on Sunday Night Football, where the defense just played great. This team has been entering its stride late in the season, and last week I think was just a bump in the road that I don't think everyone should take so harshly, at least coming into this final win and you're in kind of game.
I mean, let's be real here. You guys had no wide receivers for that game. That's not your fault. Like, if you guys had wide receivers, I think you easily clap up the Jets. You had 3 wide receivers on your active roster for the game that had never caught a pass as a Cleveland Brown. Like, that's pretty tough to overcome, even if you're playing a team like the Jets. Being without a entire skill position, essentially, is tough for an NFL team to overcome. I don't think that loss to the Jets should be taken with any like you guys were down those wide receivers and then the inside linebackers too. It wasn't just the wide receiver room that you were down.
Yes, and that really hurt. The Jets' ground game was more effective than normal because of that. And you spoke about the wide receiver position, Austin. I think that made a huge difference. And people were saying, "Oh, just run Nick Chubb, just run the ball. That's what they do best anyway." Well, when there's no threat to pass the ball, it's really I don't know. Football is a complementary game. I mean, as you guys know, with the Steelers kind of being down in their rushing attack as of late, and during that 3-game losing streak, especially, it's such a complementary game. And when you're missing an entire position group like that, like we had Austin Hooper, the tight end receiving. Other than that, I mean, everybody was out. So yeah, I mean, of course, that's just a product of the times we're in too with COVID and everything. But it was not one of those games that you look at and you just get alarmed because the team played so poorly. You more chalk it up to that. You're right.
On the note of the COVID stuff, are you still worried for this Pittsburgh game with the COVID, the players you have on COVID reserve? Because now you've gotten the wide receivers back, other than, I think, Ryan Switzer, who's sitting on the practice squad. But you now lose Denzel Ward and Malcolm Smith, and I'm pretty sure B.J. Goodson did not come off. You could correct me if I'm wrong on that.
He's still on there as of today.
Yeah, he's still on as of today. Are you concerned going into this Steelers game without Ward and without Malcolm Smith and the guys that are still
There's
on
also,
the COVID reserve?
There's also 2 safeties out too. Carl Joseph and Andrew Sendejo are both out too.
Yes, I'm worried about the COVID list. Absolutely, because those players are important for us. But I'm also worried about the other injury list. I mean, we can't forget that injuries still happen, like real, football-related injuries. And Sione Takitaki, he's questionable right now, as is Kendall Lamb. And if we are out of them, then I think that'll... On the defensive side of the ball, Taki has been one of the most underrated linebackers, I would say, in the AFC this season. And if the Browns have to go without him, that linebacker group is already more vulnerable than the rest of the defense, in my opinion. So I'm concerned about that. But yeah, the COVID list has really decimated this team, and even to go take it a step further, having the facility closed like every other day can't be beneficial for this team as they're trying to make a playoff push and head into a game that's kind of like our Super Bowl for at least for the first time in a decade, to have a win or go home kind of game, almost like a playoff game for this team. So I think that it's poor timing, but this team can overcome these players who appears that they'll be missing, but it's also the injury list that's concerning me, and the Browns are going to be shorthanded coming into this one.
I would like to point out.
Something I want to look at.
I wanted to point out, since you mentioned his name, John, that Sion Takitaki, according to PFF grading, has the best grade on the Browns defense for run defense with an overall grade of 88.6, which is basically elite. He's an elite run defender this year, and no one else on the Browns defense is within 10 points of a grade on run defense of him. So he has been one of the best run defenders in the NFL this year.
And that doesn't surprise me. I mean, he can also drop back and defend the pass too. He's that effective of a linebacker. But the Browns have been really liking to stack the box and try and dominate up front. That's been their defensive game plan all year long with a weaker secondary. So he's really the key to he's where it starts for that Browns defense, which is up front and in the trenches and making open tackles is something that he's really good at against the run. If they do end up breaking that front line, so he's a really important player for us, and we could just have to hope that whoever steps in and takes his place, if he is out, is just as effective. He's able to go.
And you mentioned that front line. There's a lot of reasons to talk about Myles Garrett and Mason Rudolph for this week's game, but I wanted to focus more in on the tactical aspect of the fact that Myles Garrett is one of the best defensive players in the league, and last year, before that incident, was on pace for a double-digit sack season. He was one sack away from what would now be his third straight double-digit sack season of his career, and he's at 13 right now, just 2 off of T.J. Watt's season-leading 15 sacks. And Garrett has been a fantastic player for you guys. Obviously, he's grading as the best player on the defense, playing at an elite level this year. He's been as advertised when it comes to his ability as a player. What has having him meant for this Browns team, especially this season?
For the defense, he's been everything. He's been the pass rusher. He's been the run stopper. Of course, he specializes in pass rushing. One of the sack leaders in the NFL. He's the leader up front there of the line that has some other underrated players, and Sheldon Richardson up there has also been playing really, really well. Obviously, this is an extremely awkward week. We think the holidays are awkward for us. Like, imagine this reunion. I'm gonna have to turn my head. I don't know how this is gonna go, but on the football field, he's a game wrecker. He's a potential game wrecker. He's always a stripped sack threat, and he's able to get his big hands up there and just get leverage on tackles and get out there and get after the quarterback and at least hurry the quarterback. And that's one thing we always talk about sacks, but those hurries and forcing throws earlier than, collapsing the pocket, forcing them quarterbacks to throw earlier than they're comfortable throwing is so important too. And that's what's helped the Browns secondary, which is just so important to give them all the help that they need. They're depleted too. So Garrett has been everything, and it really starts and ends with him this weekend, as weird as it is, ending up going up against Brew.
And I also wanted to point out that Olivier Vernon has been enjoying a really nice bounce back season too. The defense has had a lot of players step up for them, and obviously one of them being on the COVID list in Denzel Ward. With him being out, do you have concerns about the back end of the Browns defense? I know you said that that's been the unit that hasn't played great this season. Where are you at with them?
I am concerned because from Ward to Williams we got some players back there. We really do have some players back there, but without Ward this week, that hurts. And there's been some improvements throughout the season, some mild improvements from these guys, but I heard it on the Browns broadcast last week. They just were pointing out the fact that this secondary is not really an NFL secondary, and I don't blame guys like Sineho and now the other name is slipping my mind that I was going to bring up. I don't blame them. They're playing their hearts out back there. They're playing hard, but they're like backups. They're like NFL backups, and they're being asked to step into this type of big situation, and they have all year. So I give them credit for at least hanging tough in there. But this week is going to be a challenge, unlike the past several, because you got big time receivers here with a lot of speed and even some size on that Steelers team, and that's the concern. I'm not concerned about the Steelers rushing attack. I'm concerned about your passing attack, even with a backup quarterback. I'm still concerned about some of the weapons you guys have and how they match up against our secondary.
Good thing going for you guys is that you're getting Ronnie Harrison back. He was activated from IR either yesterday or today. I forget which now. But he should be helpful without Joseph and Sendeo to play there. Because he was really good. You guys got him for the Jaguars for pretty cheap for a fifth rounder, and he came in and played really well for you guys comparatively.
I hope he's 100% this week. We'll see. And yeah, again, it's if that secondary can stay disciplined and play a physical game and jam those receivers before they get out in space, I think that'll benefit them. But it's definitely, if you're going to point out one major point of concern in this game, that's where I would start, is that matchup between the Steelers pass attack and our secondary.
Yeah, you were very right to not be concerned about the Steelers' running game. I don't think there's anyone that should be, but that's a question.
Really?
That's something for Austin and I to discuss more at length another time.
I'm not sure Alabama is scared of the Steelers' rushing game.
I'm not sure Idaho is.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
In any case,
Benny Snell has had some good games, right? I mean,
a couple.
I guess I don't know.
He had he had one. He had a good game at the start of the year, and he had a good game against the Bengals a couple weeks ago. But John, when I tell you that there's problems everywhere with the running game, there's issues everywhere with the running backs, with the actual plays, with the design, with the actual execution. It'd be one thing if you could look at a running game and say we can fix it if there's one thing wrong or two things wrong, but there's something wrong everywhere. So, I mean, maybe
it's tough.
Maybe you could take lessons from, let's switch to the other side of the ball now, the way the Cleveland Browns run the football. And I know last week was not ideal. Their running game didn't produce a lot, and they weren't given the ball a ton, but there were reasons for that, as we've outlined. It all starts up front with two of the highest graded players in terms of performance this year are guards Joel Bitonio and guard Wyatt Teller. Teller, as a matter of fact, John, I don't know if this is the case now, but through the first 8 weeks of the season, he was the highest graded PFF lineman of all time through that point of a season. He has been outstanding. And in terms of a team, I think the Browns have a top 3 pass blocking and run blocking offensive line this year. Those guys have been as advertised and even more this year.
Yeah, and it helps to have a physical running back like Nick Chubb, who you can really hit those holes hard. But I give a lot of credit to Stefanski and the coaching staff for what they've been able to do with this offensive line. Obviously, in the offseason, making some moves, and of course, Conklin. That's the big one. That's the sexy one that everybody talks about. But no, like you talk about, Wyatt Teller they run the ball his way more than half the time, and it's been working. And it hasn't been those long, 40-yard touchdown runs that you see on the highlight reel, as much as it's been 7-8 yards from Nick Chubb just over and over again, and getting themselves into second and short, third and manageable, if that, and that's been the recipe for success up front. It started up front and with the running game, and it's opened up play action for the passing game, and that's the formula to victory. And that's what the Browns, when they've been playing well and when they've scored north of 30 points, that's what they've been doing well, is getting chunk rushing plays on first down, getting 5+ yards on first down on the ground, and they need to follow that formula again this week.
And let's talk a bit about those two talented running backs, Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. Both are very talented in their own right. Kareem Hunt, I believe, led the league in rushing his rookie season, and Nick Chubb has been one of the most productive backs in the NFL. In fact, probably the most productive back outside of Derrick Henry the last 2 to 3 years. What do these guys bring to the table that's different from one another, or are they almost just clones of each other?
I think they're a lot different. I know that they both have a good combination of power and speed. But besides that, I mean, you got Kareem Hunt, who's more of a third down back, who's more of a guy now who can catch screen passes, get out of the backfield and catch balls. He's also a great pass protector too on third down and on play action passing plays. And I like how he can get a yard in a third and short. Actually, both backs can, but they've been using Hunt for that a lot, especially. They're both a good combination of speed and power, but they're so complementary of each other at the same time that it's just worked magically. And I love how Kareem Hunt, the most surprising thing and the most important thing is how he's embraced his role. You talk about him leading the league in rushing with the Kansas City Chiefs his first season. Well, he's come into this situation as basically the second back to Nick Chubb, and he's embraced the role of that. He's embraced being, third down guy. He's embraced getting dirty and blocking for pass protecting for Baker Mayfield. He's just been team first, and I don't think a lot of people expected that coming in from him. But then he also gets his opportunities to shine. He's had a couple of great athletic runs, and he can finish runs too, and that's what I'm so excited about is this two-headed rushing attack is, I think, gives the Browns a huge advantage over more than half of the teams that they play because they're able to run the ball and do so with such effectiveness unpredictably with two different rushers.
It's definitely tough having to go against a team with a 1A and 1B. Like you said, Kareem Hunt led the league in rushing yards not too long ago. It's like Nick Chubb, I was a big fan of Nick Chubb. I've been a big fan of Nick Chubb. I think Nick Chubb gets a lot of disrespect, and it hasn't really stopped because now he splits time with Kareem Hunt, so people get his stats and stuff, and it really bothers me because Nick Chubb is a really, really good running back. But yeah, it's really good what you guys got going there when you have a 1A and 1B. It makes it really tough to stop, especially with an offensive line that's been revitalized and plays really well for you guys. Even without Wyatt Teller, who's been one of the best guards in PFF history grading-wise, you guys have been running pretty effectively.
Yeah, and without Nick Chubb for several games there as well. I mean, that Dallas victory, I remember when the Browns beat Dallas, I think it was 49 to something. They put up more points than they have in a long time. And they played most of that game after a Nick Chubb injury. So it just goes to show how, 1A and 1B. Well, 1B steps up and he shows how he can be a starting NFL running back as well. And I'm really excited about that, too. And just how, Nick Chubb, it's kind of funny. He's one of the most humble, soft-spoken guys in the league. He doesn't talk. He doesn't, I think that's where a lot of the disrespect comes from in some ways is just how he flies under the radar. But I love that. I absolutely love that. I think that allows for a laser-sharp focus that this offense needs. And it earns a guy like Kareem Hunt, who's more of a veteran, it earns his respect, and it's just makes them able to work so well together, and just as a cohesive unit, this whole rushing attack is, including the offensive line, is just clicking.
That's kind of crazy to think about too, because Chubb was he was the leading guy at Georgia after Todd Gurley left, but even though he was the starter ahead of Sony Michel was the guy drafted before him, and Nick Chubb rode second fiddle to his cousin Bradley out in Denver when they both got drafted the same year. I remember hearing a story about Baker Mayfield showing up to Cleveland on the plane after the draft, and Nick Chubb was with him, and everyone was asking Nick Chubb about like his cousin or something like that. Like someone thought he was his cousin, and he was like, no, or like everyone was asking where Baker Mayfield was. No one knew who Nick Chubb was, and here he is, one of the best running backs in the NFL. I just thought that was kind of funny.
It goes to show you just never know. And some of those draft picks, give them a lot of credit for that one right there. And it's turned out really well for the Browns.
So let's shift to Baker Mayfield now, a guy that the last time we talked had kind of an up and down season to that point. Played his worst game of the year and got hurt a little bit in that game, I reckon, based on the way that he was pulled so early. Then rebounded with his best game of the season, maybe the best game of his career to that point against the Bengals. Had a couple iffy games, but that was also in really bad weather with the Texans and Raiders. And then just got better every week, and then played his best game of the year, one of the best games of the year against the Titans, played well against the Ravens, and then played well against the Giants. Really, after that Steelers game, besides a couple bad weather games, Baker Mayfield has played probably the best football of his career. And then other than the Jets game last week where he had no weapons, he's been playing at a top level here. I was really unsure of where his career was going after they got thumped in Pittsburgh earlier this year, but he's been really playing well ever since then.
Yeah, he's made sharper decisions. He's gotten the ball out faster. He's been able to be more selective with the times when he decides to leave the pocket and scramble. That's allowed the offensive line to have a lot more trust in him and knowing where he's going to be, and that he's stayed in the pocket more and he's had more time too, and that certainly helps. And then of course you got all those weapons. Even with Beckham going down, you still have Landry, of course, and you got an Austin Hooper who's had a huge year, and you got running backs who can catch the ball out of the backfield. So he's had a lot of help, but that isn't to take away from what he's been able to accomplish this season, which is well, it looks more like his rookie season and even a step better than that. And I compare him more to hopefully eventually like a Drew Brees is what I would like to see him become, is more of that pocket passer. And that's really something that he's emulated more these last several weeks.
Interesting, because I know there were a lot of questions about him mid-season, which is why I always think that evaluation of quarterback needs at least like 20 games, probably closer to 30 games. And now that he's emerging from this, it looks like he's finally figured things out, and that's great for him and great for the team as we move forward here. Because obviously there was a stretch early on in the year where he maybe wasn't playing his best, and there were some questions. But I always thought it was kind of strange that when Beckham Jr. went down with that injury in that first Bengals game, it's like he's played his best football since then. Do you think that Beckham going down, do you think that it's just been a bad fit with OBJ, and like he's not having to worry about the go-to guy, he doesn't have to force the ball to people as much? Or do you think it's just a fact of maybe he just got hot when he got hurt, that was just random chance?
I think it's somewhat random. Honestly, I think we've seen Mayfield play extremely well with Beckham and Landry in the lineup together. Now, there is something to be said for, and you make a good point, forcing the ball, forcing it to Beckham, who we know he's quite the character. He wants his touches. He wants to get out in space and get the ball in his hands. And there may be something to that, and I shouldn't discredit that. At the same time, I think Mayfield's figured it out. And with or without Beckham, I think there would have been a similar result. Just because I don't see a looser, more free Mayfield. I see a sharper Mayfield. I see a Mayfield who's making quicker decisions and staying in the pocket and staying more disciplined and knowing when to throw the ball away. I don't see a Mayfield who's no longer forcing the ball. Which would be the case if Beckham was the only issue. I see a Mayfield just more sharp and better prepared, and I think a lot of that goes back to Monday through Saturday, and even the coaches speak of how much he's improved in that facet of the game. So I think it's somewhat coincidence, but I'm not sure. There could be an element of now not having to worry about getting OBJ his touches. That part of it doesn't hurt. It may hurt though, missing a weapon like Beckham. So I'm not saying that it's a good thing that Beckham is down, but it's definitely, that part of it could be a positive. You're right about that. But mostly I just give Mayfield credit for being more prepared and just making better decisions and quicker decisions.
Alrighty, let's kind of turn focus now to this game. John, I wanted to mention to you that in terms there's only been one player the Steelers have announced that is going to sit, and that's Ben Roethlisberger, the quarterback. But I think it would be prudent to mention to you that center Marquise Pouncey, guard David DeCastro, linebacker TJ Watt, and defensive lineman Cameron Hayward all have not practiced on Wednesday and Friday this week with a non-injury related designation, which to me tells me they're most likely going to sit. Now, that's not official, but that would be what Austin and I are led to believe. Is that correct, Austin?
Yeah, I think that those guys will sit. The only one, I think David DeCastro might play. I'm thinking he might, because comparatively, I'm pretty sure Marquise Pouncey got the entire week off.
Oh,
and,
I should clarify. Hayward practiced on Thursday, and DeCastro's practiced on Thursday and Friday. So
I don't know.
What we know is
this is pretty good.
We know that Ben Roethlisberger, Chris Boswell, and Terrell Edmonds, the starting safety, quarterback, and kicker, are all going to be out. And it looks like TJ Watt and Marquise Pouncey will be out. We're not sure about anyone else. So that's at least 4 starters in our kicker right there. Deontay Johnson also has an illness, so who knows what that is. That could potentially be a COVID-related issue. But as far as that goes, knowing that they're going to be without their quarterback and starting center at least, John, I wanted to get your thoughts just briefly on what you think that this game is going to be for the Steelers, how you think they might play. Obviously, there's a drop-off from Ben Roethlisberger to Mason Rudolph, and nothing is guaranteed, but I would have to think that the Browns would have a pretty good chance to win this game on Sunday, given that fact.
Yeah, and that's why I'd be optimistic about it. But at the same time, you talk about those 4 starters and probably several more as well. But there are other players that are just as competent, especially on that defense. If they do end up playing some starters on the defense, it's not like this is an entire second unit that out there this weekend. So I don't completely dismiss that. And like you said, I mean, you still have capable backups too. I mean, Mason Rudolph has played NFL games. We're talking about somebody, in my opinion, a lot more competent than a guy like Duck Hodges, who came in was a flash in the pan. And now Mason Rudolph is a career NFL backup quarterback. So I mean, it's one of those games where you can't just take anything for granted. Even if you have starters playing backups or whatever the matchups are, you still have to look at them individually. And that Steeler defense is one of the strongest in the league. And obviously, I mean, you could say, oh, they're not playing for anything. I mean, they still are. They're playing a division rival. Some of these guys are playing. This is their one chance to impress. In week 17, they know that they're not going to get much time in the playoffs. They haven't gotten much time all year. So there is a lot on the line, and I think the Steelers will play well. But like you said, I'm optimistic just because it is a big drop-off down to Mason Rudolph, who's clearly a backup quarterback, and the Browns' pass rush, if they can get going, can make a big difference right there and hold the Steelers hopefully to less than 20 points, which hopefully for on my end anyway, which would be a big victory for them. And we saw it last year in that Thursday night game, how well that Browns defense played. So I'm optimistic, but yeah, like I said, it's you can't take anything for granted.
So I would expect a relatively simple game plan from the Browns in this one. I'm curious if you'd agree with me. I just think that, like you kind of laid it out, their 11 are probably going to be better than the Steelers' 11 given what's going on. So I would think that they're not going to try to do anything too crazy in this one.
Well, and the game plan on offense starts and ends on the ground. And on defense, it starts and ends with the pass rush. So, yeah, I think it's a fairly simple game plan. I think it's let's try to do what we do best and as long as we do what we do best, it's going to be good enough. And that's the game plan.
All right, I gotcha. That being said, can you give us one kind of thing that you're going to be looking for in this game? And I know it could be easy to say Myles Garrett, Mason Rudolph. If you want to go with that, that's fine. Or if you want to go with something else, you're welcome to say you're looking at something else a little differently. Like maybe something you want to look at. Oh, the Browns maybe haven't done this great this year. I want to see if they can do this better before a potential playoff game.
Well, Myles Garrett and Mason Rudolph is certainly interesting. It's certainly got to be one of the most awkward reunions in the history of sports. But let's face it, that would be more of a storyline if there weren't playoff implications in this game. There are playoff implications, and that's why I'm looking for the offensive line play of the Browns against the defensive line of Pittsburgh, which even a backup defense line, if that is the case, and they may play some starters, as you guys were saying, it may not be all backups. It's a critical matchup, and the first quarter is going to be so telling in this one. I think it's going to come down to whether or not the Browns can run the ball early, not necessarily those huge chunk plays that you're going to end up seeing on the highlights, because they will get a couple of those. Can they run it consistently for 5+ yards on first down, or are the Steelers going to win the battle in the trenches and stop them, after 1-2 yard gain on first down? Because that'll tell the rest of the story. Whether or not Mayfield, who's been more consistent in the pocket, he's been bad in third and long. He's been really good in second and third and manageable. So that's going to tell the story for the rest of the game. It's first quarter offensive line play versus Pittsburgh's defensive line. Obviously, there's matchups on the other side of the ball that are important too, but that's the most important one that sticks out to me.
All right. And then just kind of how you think this game is going to go, and give me a final score prediction.
Oh, well, you're killing me here, guys. I have to predict my beloved Browns making the playoffs, which to me is like, it's basically a curse. I mean, I'm basically putting the kibosh on them. But if I'm gonna look at this from an objective point of view, which I'm sure I'm supposed to do, right? I would have to say that the Browns 11 are better than the Steelers 11 in this game. Not if there ends up being a rematch in the playoffs like 6 days from this game, then we have a different story, because we have starters playing for the Steelers and we have a whole different conversation. But in this game, the Browns are paper stack up better than the Steelers. They should win. The Steelers will score. The Browns will score. Neither team is going to run away with this in the first half, but because the Steelers backups are still very competent. But the Browns running game should produce enough to give Mayfield some play action opportunities and get some plays down the field with receivers back finally, and they should win this game. I would have to go 27-16.
Alrighty, John. Well, you did allude to it. There's a strong possibility that this is not just the second time these two teams could meet. They could very well be playing again the following week in the AFC wildcard playoffs. And if that is the case, we'd very much like to have you back on for a third time this season. You'd be spoiling us by doing so, but we'd be very happy.
Yeah, we'd love it.
Yeah, we're all for it, man. And we thank you again for coming on and having this interview with us. It's always nice having you on, and I hope you get to enjoy the game. And like I said, we'll see if it ends up happening, but we'll have to get together at some point here, even if it's after the season and it's been too long. But should be a fun game. I can't remember the last time. I mean, I guess 2007 would have been the last time there was this much at stake for the Browns in the last week of the season.
I mean, that's debatable, because you did have an 0-15 team going up against the Steelers that 1 week. So, I mean, yeah, but no, you're right. As far as playoff implications are concerned, you're right. It's been that many years and then some, because they're, obviously the last time it actually went the Browns' way was in 2003. But yeah, no, this game should be a lot of fun, and I'm hoping for a rematch, guys. I don't know about you, because you gotta, I'm sure you're trying to win this game and potentially lock up a better seed in the AFC playoff picture. But I'm sure hoping for a rematch and that we can do this again. And really glad that you guys had me on. It's always great talking with you.
John, thank you so
Great
much.
having you, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for joining, and we'll talk to you next time. But until then, enjoy the game, and we'll be right back on the Stronger Than Steel podcast. Thank you very much, John. Take care, buddy.
Bye.
You have been listening to Stronger Than Steel podcast. Thank you for joining us today, and don't forget to check out our website listed in the description below.